Hello and welcome to the special edition of our program, CHW Forever, with your friend, your host, your CHW, Rafael Calderon.
Here in Hudson on the community food pantry, there is a lot of need on this town of food, and we are appealing to your generosity today. Please come here at the Hudson-Litchfield Rotary Club. Join us on the food pantry of Hudson, next door to St. John's Church on Library Street.
Ok, eso fue mucho, no sé si lo puedo decir todo, pero los estamos invitando a que vengan aquí a Food Pantry de Hudson. Hay una donación de comida, es un evento para ayudar a personas, familias en Hudson que están sufriendo por falta de comida. Nosotros estamos aquí en nombre del Club Rotatorio de Hudson y Litchfield y queremos que más personas en general vengan y nos apoyen. ¿Cómo ves?
That's perfect. Muy bien. Very good.
Gracias.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm Karen from the Hudson Community Food Pantry, and just would like to say Merry Christmas to start with, but anytime you would like to make a donation or if you need help, just check our website. It's Hudson Community Food Pantry. Make sure you do the New Hampshire one. There is one in Massachusetts. You can make donations on there. You can also get our contact information. We're here on Tuesday and Wednesday mornings from like 7:30 to 10:30 if you need to drop off anything. And if you need assistance, just go to our website and you can see the form and the information in order to sign up to if you need some help.
Hudson, New Hampshire.
Hudson, New Hampshire.
Hampshire.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you for letting me
Oh, you're
record you.
welcome.
I will edit it, just feel free to
Yes, I think that can be.
Oh, well, thank you so much for inviting me, and Matt, thank you for inviting me to come and speak with you folks this morning about myself and Funeral Solutions and things. I know you gave me that glowing introduction of my name and my title and all of those things. You might have pulled that off of
LinkedIn.
Probably off of my LinkedIn. Just out of curiosity, when I speak to a group and sometimes they have preconceived notions of what we're going to be talking about or my backstory or whatever. When you heard that you were going to have a speaker from a company called Funeral Solutions, any thoughts? Any ideas, or what we were going to be talking about today, or anything?
Alternatives
Yeah.
for burial,
Okay.
etc.
Okay, yeah, that's part of it. Yeah.
Pre-planning.
Pre-planning? Yeah. Okay. Okay. It's funny because a lot of times people can be somewhat excited about the idea of getting information about kind of a taboo subject that isn't really out there. You can't really get a lot of information, and even if you go online or on the internet, what you're getting there can sometimes be very biased. Can sometimes be really a marketing opportunity for somebody on the internet to pull you in and then take you down a rabbit hole that you may not. It might be starting out as information, but it's not necessarily information that's going to help you. It's just going to pull you into whatever their paradigm is there. So what I did a few years ago, but very actively in the last year, is create Funeral Solutions as a way of getting unbiased information out to people about funeral care and options and things like that without necessarily any agenda. I don't necessarily work for a provider, a funeral home, a company, or anything else. I came from that world. A little bit of a backstory. I have, and I still am, I'm a licensed funeral director in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts. I've owned at one time 6 actual funeral homes. And I've been involved in pretty much any aspect of funeral care to the point where I am also a past president of the Massachusetts Funeral Directors Association. I'm currently the president of the New Hampshire Funeral Directors Association. With all that being said, what I'm doing now is I'm working on the other side of the fence. I discovered that traditional funeral care, as constituted, for a lot of folks is not answering their needs and questions and concerns. And what they're doing is perpetuating a model that really goes back to 1984. So the model most funeral services, funeral care providers are running under is a model that was mandated by the Federal Trade Commission in 1984. So when you go into a traditional funeral home, you're really dealing with somebody that's under the auspices of a model that's 40 years old, and it's been tweaked a lot of times, but it's like driving a 40-year-old automobile. It may look wonderful and everything else, but it's still a 40-year-old automobile, and not everybody wants a 40-year-old automobile now. So what I've done is I was working with a lot of families trying to figure out how best to serve, and the epiphany for me came when I needed to be able to be flexible enough to work with folks and not have all the overhead and all the compliance and everything else that you have to have when you own a physical facility, or you're entrenched in a industry that isn't necessarily looking to change for a variety of reasons. So anyways, I'm here today from Funeral World, but I'm representing your thoughts, interests, questions, and concerns more than anything else. Because quite frankly, I think most people here can remember the old traditional funeral model of the 1 or 2 day wake and the body present, and there's preparation of the body and a casket and a wake and a religious service and a burial, and you know, that was always the model, and that's pretty much the model that funeral service still maintains. That's the model that they've been built on, and they continue to hold on to that model. Just out of curiosity, how many people still find that a useful model or a helpful model or a model that would actually serve their needs today if they needed to make those decisions?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're still thinking that having the wake and the religious service and everything else and a burial is something that would be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, we've in the past 10 years, my sister has died. Died in Texas, got cremated, ashes sent up here.
Ah, got cremated.
Cremated, yeah. And,
okay. Was there any kind of a viewing of the body before the cremation?
They had a celebration of life down there, which was after the cremation had occurred, so the urn was there.
So there was not
And not a body.
There wasn't, so the model that used to be where the body was, there was an embalming process, there was the body was displayed, there was a casket. That wasn't the case.
Not with my sister, with my my mother. It was the traditional, completely, as you said. The and up here we did not have a funeral mass for her. We just had a priest do the graveside service where her ashes were going to be interred next to our parents.
Okay. And that was helpful?
Well, though it was appropriate for her.
Okay.
I mean, because I had reached out to one of our then members of the Rotary Club, who was a funeral director, Leo DeMont, and said, "Hey, they're gonna cremate her and send her ashes up. You know, do I need to get them sent to you?" He says, "You know, you can, but you know, and I could charge you for it. But this is something you can do. You do not need me to do this for you."
Okay.
So it just it reinforced that he's a pretty good funeral director in terms of honesty and everything. And the other thing was it gave me the confidence that I follow these steps, everything's going to go okay.
You hit on an interesting point because a lot of the folks that I talk to are not necessarily looking to hire a funeral home to do some of the things that you are suggesting.
Yeah.
But they don't know who to hire, where to go, and that's where I step in with a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, from just glancing through this, you look as if you are a purveyor of information to potential client.
A funeral concierge, if you will, or somebody that can actually walk you through all of the
Yeah,
steps.
yeah.
And not just the funeral home step, but the church step, or the cemetery step, or all of the different components. I tend to pull all of those
Yeah.
together.
I mean, both Chris and I are ex-military. We are in the VFW. I served as the chaplain of the VFW for 5 years here, and there have been a number of veterans from our post who have passed away. So, you know, we have seen a variety of different types of services, and they all have included the VFW coming and doing a short prayer service and a ritual. That's the word I was looking for. A ritual for the service member who's passed away, and the families seem to find that to be very comforting. I mean, I don't think we've ever had somebody say no. No. You know. So anyway, that's
There's so many things that can be done. You know, going back to the model that we're familiar with, that model was built on certain things that were true 40 years ago. That model was built on the fact that most of us came from a Judeo-Christian culture, and we grew up with that model. But most of the time, the model was based on our ethnic background. You know, our ethnic groups would have a certain way to memorialize and say goodbye. Just about everybody was buried, and everybody had a faith community that they were involved in. So your religion of origin, your ethnicity of origin was all part of it, and burial was primarily what we did to say goodbye. And currently, right now, anybody have any idea what the cremation rate is in New Hampshire right now? How many people get cremated rather than buried?
23%.
23? Anybody else?
I'd say like 65.
Any other guesses? The last figure I saw a few months ago was just shy of 80.
Wow.
80, almost 8 in 10 people choose cremation. So one of the problem in traditional funeral care is that model that the Federal Trade Commission mandated on April 1st, 1984, where the funeral homes had to work under a certain pricing structure and cost presentation structure, was based on a model that was prevalent back then. When you would have a wake, when you would have embalming, you would have a casket, you would have all of these different things. And a lot of these companies are built with an overhead that is meant to support that. They have the employees, they have the big, beautiful funeral home and the big black cars and all, that costs money to maintain. And what's happening is people are looking for new, better, and different. They're looking for more simple. Cremation has become a huge part of ritualization for people other than burial for a variety of reasons. We can talk about that. People have, the ethnic communities have kind of boiled down. It's just that everybody's just together now. It's not really like it used to be. I remember growing up in Lawrence, there was an Italian section and a French section and a German section and an Irish section. It's just Lawrence right now. So that's all deteriorated from the old model, and our religious communities, our traditional religious communities are evolving and changing, and now it's not, people are not as religious as much as they used to be. They're a little more spiritual now. So there's a spirituality that goes along with saying goodbye and everything else. So that's all part of it. But the problem is that traditional funeral care just hasn't moved fast enough to adapt to this. And unfortunately, you have the really wonderful full-service funeral providers that have to have their overhead on top of whatever you're asking them to provide. And then if you try to go to a lower common denominator and find somebody that's a low-cost provider, they're cutting corners that you're not looking to be cut. But you don't know it without actually having somebody explain why you're getting that cremation deal for $9.95, which isn't a deal at $9.95. by the way, I can walk you through the process that $995 is not going to be $995, and even if it were, you aren't going to get the services you're looking for. So that has to be a discussion. The whole idea of what Funeral Solutions and what I do now is that I basically sit with people individually and I unpack all of these options and questions for people, and I kind of come up. Mine is more of a planning service. I do a lot of work with people like Matt that are financial planners. They're working with people that are planners. I work with elder care attorneys, with hospices, with clergy, with a variety of different people that work with families and individuals that are planners by nature. And part of the planning that they are doing includes funeral planning. And it's not necessarily that it's imminent, but it's going to be at some point. And when we do planning, I'm doing planning with a couple in Melrose the other day, and it's not that they are necessarily thinking that they're going to pass soon, but they have a place in Jackson, New Hampshire, they have a place in Melrose, and they have an only son in Texas that they visit 4 or 5 months out of the year. And basically what we're talking about when I talk with them is, okay, what happens if anything happens to one of us at any of these 3 places? What do we do? I'm putting a plan together for them, so in case of emergency, break glass. This is what we do in Jackson. This is what we do in Melrose. This is what we do in Texas. And then once we put the plan together, then once we know a provider, and that provider has taken care of the transportation of the person who has passed away, we hit pause, and then we back up, and then we see what the next appropriate step is. So that they're not making that decision at a time when not only are they upset, but they're not thinking clearly. And then we, like any other advanced directive planning, we look at it every 3 to 5 years, and okay, we no longer have the house in Jackson, we don't have to think about that. But we're moved out of Melrose, and maybe we're in Hudson now, who knows? So, we just dust it off, we play with it a little bit, and we move it around. So there's so many different components. I don't like to necessarily as Matt will probably tell you, I could probably sit up here and talk for an hour about a variety of things. Many of them may not have any sense or mean anything to anybody here, but what I like to do is I like to really make it your presentation, your meeting, and find out what your questions are, because I'm guessing that there aren't a lot of times where you get to ask the funeral director, and the funeral director's not trying to sell you something or convince you that his or her building is the best, or their price structure is the best, or whatever. I don't have a dog in the fight, so I can be very objective, very unbiased. I can pretty much just guide you in a variety of, well, you kept this, and this, and then we can unpack it from there. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I can certainly keep talking. But yeah.
Just 2 quick questions.
Yeah.
So again, just my case might be, I had a mother who was a surgical nurse, and she did an anatomical gift when she passed. To the teaching hospital down in Mobile, Alabama, for doctors and medical people coming forward as students. So in honoring her, I've set up that whole process for myself too, with Dartmouth up here. So they take care of all the expenses for transport and all that such. And I've planned with a church and and not a funeral home, if that's the correct term. I assume it's the same term these days. So just to manage things, if you could do these things ahead of time.
Absolutely.
You can sit and do this with them ahead of time, I understand, and it should be no cost to set it up and leave plans with a church or with a funeral home. Even in something, this is a little not unique, but it's
well,
not.
Certainly, if you know who the church is going to be, you could certainly talk with them and have your plans on record with the church. The church is probably going to be a little more stable than the funeral home. One of the reasons, and there's so many reasons why I do what I do and why I'm so passionate about it, is that part of what I saw with funeral service is that the traditional funeral homes, Leo Dumonts of the world and everything else, that have been a staple of a community for years and years and years, that's all changing. These funeral homes are either closing, going out of business, being bought up by a competitor or an investor or a corporate entity or whatever, and it's not the Smith Funeral Home, where it's kindly old Mr. Smith, who's been part of that community forever, you know, and once you put your arrangements in with that funeral home, you don't know where that funeral home's gonna be 1, 3, 5 years down the road. And then what do you do at that point? So a lot of the planning that I do, to your point, is that what I do is I plan with the individual, with the family, and with their advisors, and they control the plan. They're not turning the plan over to a funeral home. They're not turning it over to anybody that isn't going to be part of that process down the road. So yeah, the stability factor of where funeral homes are right now is challenging. We're seeing a real decrease in funeral homes in New Hampshire right now. Individual family-owned funeral homes. It's either corporate. The Cremation Society of New Hampshire has taken over a huge chunk of what's going on. They have offices throughout the state. And it's not that these are good or bad or better or worse or whatever, they're just different, but they're changing constantly. So if you have some idea and you want to keep it a certain level of stability, you don't want to hand it over to an industry that's in transition right now. It's not quite stable. To your point though, with body donation, that's tricky. One thing, you do have to be registered before you passed. All that paperwork has to be in place, because people used to come to me, person died, says they always wanted to be donated to Harvard. I said, well, have they done the paperwork? No, we'll do it now. I said, no, you won't, because they won't accept that the paperwork. It has to be on record. The other caveat to that is that even if the paperwork's on record, they do not have to accept the donation. And people don't realize that, oh, we're all set, everything's done, everything's ready to go. We call Harvard, Harvard's like, we're all set, sorry, thank you. Now what do? What's plan B? Not everybody has a plan B. I'm there to help them with plan B, necessarily.
And Dartmouth up there takes care of any eventuality the family wants as part of that planning process.
If the body's accepted, they take all responsibility and cost.
They'll accept it, or they'll manage it. That's their policy right now.
Oh, okay.
And I confirm with them every year too. They like to have you confirm every
Good idea.
that everything's there, the paperwork's there, were there any changes?
Good idea.
The other quick question I have is, are there 1 or 2 instances that with more planning, like would have been a couple of stories that families really should have known about, or individuals should have known about, that something came up that was overwhelming or histrionic, or something that really didn't go well that might have benefited from your services? Is there anything over the years that you've really helped avoid, or that because they didn't do it, it happened? So,
well, if you don't plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. The old adage. You don't know what you don't know until you know it. And people think, historically we never had to think about this. We died, the local funeral home was called, they set everything up, and you went to the church and you were buried. Well, you know what? We don't all live in the community that we were born in or we were raised in. You know, sometimes we move into Hudson and we don't know anything about Hudson. We come to the Rotary, we hear about something, but then all of a sudden, what happens if you pass away and you're from New York and you're in Hudson, and okay, well, who do I call? What do I do? You know, do I have an elder care attorney? Can they give me a suggestion? Can they give me a recommendation? Maybe they can, maybe they can't. You know, it used to be fairly well laid out for us, but it's not. You know, we're a mobile society. We're a society that doesn't necessarily find value in what was 40 years ago, things like that. So, are there times there's a lot of times where people, you're traumatized twice if you don't have a plan. You're traumatized by the loss, and then you're traumatized by the process. Because your world's been turned upside down, you've lost somebody, significance, and then you call somebody and you may or may not even know that person, or even if you know it's Smith Funeral Home and you've driven by it the last 10 years, you don't know Mr. Smith, he's no longer there, it's owned by a corporation, there's some kid just out of mortuary school with a clipboard, and their incentive is to try to upsell you urns and memorial packages and things like that, and there's no connection. there's no connection. And then all of a sudden, you know, you walk away and, you know, your credit card's just been hit for a lot more than you needed to. And then when you wake up a month later, it's like, what happened? What happened? And you know, that's what I'm trying to prevent. But it's not always a topic that people like to talk about. But if you talk about it, it's like anything else. It's the elephant in the room, but if you eat it a little bit at a time, all of a sudden it goes away. So, yeah.
I have questions.
Sure.
One is very quick. I was late. I apologize again. I'm coming from Manchester and traffic, all that stuff. So I missed the introduction for the video. If you could please introduce yourself.
Sure.
And second, do you do free consultation? Like if somebody were unsure on how they want to go, would you talk to them, or would they have to sort of like hire you for you to get involved with them?
I would talk to them to see what the scope of their questioning and interests are, but if they're asking me to do actual planning, there are fees that go along with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I give some advice, but if I have to drill down a little bit deeper for somebody, there's a cost for that consultation. Like any other advisor, whether it be in a MAT or a lawyer or whatever.
Yes.
Yes. But once again, as a form of an introduction, my name is Rick Dewhurst, and I represent Funeral Solutions, a funeral planning company where we actually work for the client and their advisor, and we do not work for a specific provider or entity. We work on your behalf only.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Matt.
I'll just say a couple things. First off, when I first started talking with Rick, this was never on my radar whatsoever, whatever it may be. And when he conveyed to me how reactionary it really is, and that there's no, like a lot of people don't have planning in place for celebration of life, whatever it may be, all that other stuff. It opened my eyes to realize, wow, this really is an antiquated system, and it's a reactionary system most of the time. And like you said, it's an emotional time. I'm dealing with several estates with several of my clients right now, and they're just so distraught right now trying to deal with everything, settle the estate and all that, and on top of that, they have to deal with all this stuff too, and it's just a mess. Whereas if you can have a written plan in place, whatever it may be, you just tweak the plan every now and again. If life changes, whatever it may be, people change, families change, whatever it is. So I find this extremely valuable to the point where I even sent my parents to go see Rick. Well, not sent them, forced them, really, to go see Rick. And now they have the written plan in place. We know exactly what to do when parents die. Me and my brother know exactly what to do. We know exactly where they want the celebration of life. We also know exactly how much it's going to cost, too, which is important as well. So, thank you, Rick.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. To that point, too, I do get calls from people that have experienced actual losses and they don't know what to do, and they call me to help them figure out what the next steps are. And one of the things that we do initially is just identify an initial provider, but then we hit the pause button so that I slow the process down for them. They're not dragged into a meeting with the funeral director and thrown, we basically sit and we talk about, okay, what's going to happen. If we need a couple of days just to decompress before we even do that, the funeral provider can care for the person's body for as long as it takes for us to gain our composure and start to think about what is actually appropriate. So, I'm the one that kind of slows it down for people, and I'm the one that anchors the process for them in a lot of cases. So, but yeah, I know we're past 8:30. So,
Thank you.
oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.